the girl who stood against a chief's nephew in the quiet village of Nyamisi. Mornings began with the crowing of the roosters and the distant laughter of children running barefoot along the dusty paths. I remember seeing Amina first from my porch, her small figure moving steadily toward the river, a worn basket balanced on her head. She had a kind of presence that made people notice without her ever speaking a word. Her hair was braided tightly, adorned with tiny wooden beads that clinked softly when she walked. Everyone in the village knew her family. Her mother, Mariam, was a gentle woman who worked tirelessly in the fields, and her father, now older and stooped, tended their small patch of yams and cassava. Amina's life seemed simple, yet beneath the surface, it carried a quiet strength. It was during one of the market days that things began to stir. The market in Nyamisi was more than a place to buy food or tools. It was the heart of the village, where news traveled fast and reputations were made. Amina had gone to sell vegetables from her mother's garden, small bundles of okra and tomatoes wrapped in banana leaves. It was there that she first met Mbaraka, the chief's nephew. He was young, perhaps in his early 20s, and carried himself with the arrogance of someone who believed the world owed him respect. His eyes, dark and calculating, lingered too long on Amina, and though at first she thought it was curiosity, it soon became obvious that his interest was unwelcome. Mbaraka began to appear wherever Amina went. If she walked to the river to fetch water, he would ride past on his bicycle, pretending to examine the fields but always glancing in her direction. In the evenings, when the village gathered around the fire to tell stories, he would linger at the edge of the crowd, his gaze fixed, and sometimes his voice carrying through the night with words meant to intimidate. It was clear he believed that his family's status gave him the power to take whatever he desired. But Amina was not one to bow. She carried herself with the quiet dignity that her mother had taught her, reminding everyone that even a girl from a small home could hold strength beyond measure. One afternoon, Amina confided in me while we both washed the clothes in the river. Her hands were steady as she scrubbed the cloth, but her eyes betrayed worry. "He thinks he can scare me," she said quietly, almost to herself, her voice blending with the gentle rush of the river. "But I will not let him touch my life, not my family, not my dignity." I could feel the tension in her words, a mixture of fear and courage that made my own heart pound. She spoke of the things Mbaraka had done, small insults first, then more direct threats, and the way he tried to corner her on her way home from the fields. "I cannot tell my parents," she whispered. "They would worry, and it would bring shame to our family. I must find another way." I watched her face, lit by the afternoon sun, and knew she was forming a plan that no one in the village had imagined. The next weeks became a careful dance. Amina moved through the village with a new awareness, studying Mbaraka's habits, observing when he left the compound of the chief, when he rode out to the fields, and how the villagers reacted to him. She spoke to her friends quietly, careful not to draw attention. Her closest companion, Halima, agreed to help, along with Juma, a boy whose family owned the small shop at the market entrance. They devised ways to gather proof without confrontation, subtle methods that would not bring shame to Amina's family. Messages were whispered behind walls of huts, and small observations were recorded in secret. It was a web of quiet defiance, woven with courage, patience, and careful strategy. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows over the village, Amina and her friends sat under the baobab tree near the river. The air was heavy with the scent of dry earth and the soft smoke of cooking fires. "We need to be clever," she said, tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick. "He thinks power is in fear, but real strength is in truth. We will show the village what he is without making our families targets." Her voice was steady, commanding respect, not just from her friends, but from anyone who might have been listening. It was a moment that felt larger than the village itself, as if the river and the trees and the winds themselves understood that a quiet revolution was being born in their midst. And so, the days that followed were a mix of vigilance and courage. Amina moved through the market, pretending to be ordinary, while noting every gesture, every word, every interaction that Mbaraka had with others. She learned that he often boasted about his family's influence and tried to manipulate the younger boys in the village to do his bidding. She collected this information discreetly, storing it in her mind and in small notes hidden in the reeds along the riverbank. She knew that exposing him required more than courage. It required timing, the kind of precise timing that only someone who understood the heartbeat of the village could master. The tension was palpable. Every glance from Mbaraka was a test, every whisper in the market a potential trap. Yet Amina's resolve only hardened. She began to involve more friends, not in direct confrontation, but in observing, supporting, and preparing the village for a reckoning that would not humiliate her family but would reveal the truth. It was a delicate balance, and one that required intelligence, patience, and unwavering bravery. By the time the full moon rose, casting silver light over Nyamisi, Amina had gathered enough knowledge to make a move that would shock the village and begin to shift the power that Mbaraka believed was unchallengeable. The full moon hung low over Nyamisi, its pale light spilling over the huts and the winding dirt paths. Amina moved through the village with careful steps, her basket of cassava balanced neatly on her head, yet her mind was far from the morning chores. The air was thick with anticipation, as though even the trees whispered secrets of what was to come. She met Halima and Juma at the edge of the market, near the granary, where no one lingered after sundown. They exchanged silent nods, each understanding that the next days would demand precision, courage, and unyielding wit. Amina had observed Mbaraka for weeks, noting every moment of arrogance, every instance where he overstepped boundaries, every time he assumed his wealth and family name made him untouchable. She knew the villagers feared him not openly, but in hushed tones behind closed doors, in the nervous laughter that followed his appearances. That fear had to be dismantled, not with anger or confrontation, but with undeniable evidence. And so, they began to weave a plan that relied on both ingenuity and discretion. The first step was gathering proof. Halima would mingle near the chief's compound, feigning interest in Mbaraka's farming ventures, while Amina watched from the shadowed path behind the millet fields. Juma, with his quick hands and keen memory, noted details from the marketplace, the bribes Mbaraka offered boys to run errands, the whispers he spread to undermine the elders, the gestures of intimidation he used when he thought no one was paying attention. Night after night, Amina compiled these observations, and during the brief moments when she returned home, she etched the details into a worn wooden board in her room, a secret ledger hidden beneath her bed. It was not easy. Mbaraka grew restless, his attempts at coercion becoming bolder. One evening, as Amina returned from the river, he blocked her path near the granary, pretending to tie his bicycle to a post. "Amina," he called, his voice low and smooth. "Why do you avoid me? You know I only mean to help you." She looked him straight in the eyes, her calm defiance piercing the arrogance that surrounded him. "Help is not needed when it is unwanted," she said softly, and sidestepped him with the grace of someone who had mastered balance both physically and morally. He flushed with anger, but there was no one to witness the encounter. And Amina's patience allowed her to turn it into another thread of evidence in her growing tapestry of truth. Word began to travel, not through gossip, but through subtle shifts in the village. Amina's friends quietly encouraged other young women and men to observe the chief's nephew, not to retaliate, but to protect themselves and one another. It was a network of silent witnesses, each paying attention to behavior that had previously been dismissed as privilege or power. Amina guided them, teaching how to watch without being seen, how to note incidents without confrontation, and how to maintain their dignity. Each day, the ledger under her bed grew thicker, every line a testament to courage and careful observation. One afternoon, Amina visited the elder women of the village under the guise of delivering food. Mariam, her mother, worked alongside her, unaware of the details her daughter had gathered. The elder women, with faces lined by time and wisdom, spoke of traditions and expectations, of honor and shame. Amina listened carefully, storing their words as she always had, understanding that tradition could be both a shield and a weapon. She approached them not with accusation but with questions that would reveal the truth in their own reflections. "Do we allow fear to dictate how we live?" she asked gently. "Or do we uphold justice quietly, so our families are protected?" The women exchanged glances, and though the conversation seemed ordinary, it planted seeds that would grow when the time came to expose Mbaraka. As the plan neared its culmination, tension coiled tight within Amina. She understood the risk. If the chief or his nephew discovered her preparations, the consequences could be severe. Yet she moved forward with the same calm determination she had shown at the river weeks before. Halima and Juma played their roles flawlessly, feeding the narrative of ordinary village life, while Amina orchestrated the larger pattern of revelation. They prepared to expose Mbaraka in a way that was undeniable yet respectful, ensuring the honor of the families involved remained intact. The day of reckoning arrived quietly, almost unremarkably, as the village gathered for a communal meal after the harvest. The air smelled of roasted yams and millet porridge, and children ran between the huts, their laughter weaving through the tension that only the observant could feel. Amina arrived with her basket of vegetables, placing them carefully among the communal offerings. She moved as though she were simply fulfilling her role in village life, yet her eyes scanned the crowd. Noting the nervous shifts in Mbaraka's posture, the subtle glances he sent to his friends and the unsuspecting elders who would soon witness truth unfold. Then she began. Amina approached the chief, her head held high, her voice steady. "Chief, I have something that the village should know." The words were simple, but the weight behind them caused a ripple through the gathering. The chief's brow furrowed, and Mbaraka's face tightened as he realized this was no ordinary complaint. With a subtle gesture, Amina signaled Halima, who stepped forward with her own testimony, precise and clear, recounting observations without accusation, only fact. Juma presented the small records he had kept, listing dates, interactions, and incidents that could not be denied. The village listened, spellbound, as the network of quiet resistance Amina had nurtured for weeks came together in one undeniable display. By the time the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across the huts, the truth had been revealed. Mbaraka was cornered, not through violence or shame, but through the meticulous patience and bravery of a girl who refused to bow. The elders deliberated, weighing the evidence, and in the end, justice was served in a way that honored the village's traditions while challenging the arrogance of unchecked power. Amina's family remained respected, their dignity intact, and a subtle shift began in the village's understanding of courage and authority. The village of Nyamisi had never felt so alive. The morning after Mbaraka's confrontation, the air was thick with a mixture of relief and quiet celebration. Women hung their laundry on lines with a newfound lightness in their movements, and men who had once skirted the chief's nephew with nervous glances now walked with steadier steps. Even the children seemed braver, their laughter louder and freer. Amina moved among them, her basket now light, her eyes alert but calm. There was no arrogance in her stride, only the quiet satisfaction of someone who had done what needed to be done. The elders, guided by the chief himself, gathered in the main square under the great mango tree. It was here that the final discussions were to take place. Mbaraka sat on a low stool, his shoulders stiff, his face pale with the realization that the network of evidence against him was irrefutable. The chief, a man of few words but immense respect, looked at his nephew with disappointment that weighed heavier than anger. "Nephew," he said slowly, "you have allowed pride to blind you. You have forgotten the dignity that binds our village together." Amina watched silently from the edge of the circle, her hands folded neatly, heart steady. The elders listened to her friend's recounting of events, each testimony precise and calm, reflecting weeks of careful observation. The process of delivering justice in Nyamisi was deliberate. It was not enough to punish Mbaraka. He needed to understand the consequences of abusing power and to restore the trust that had been broken. The chief decreed that Mbaraka would work alongside the villagers for the next season, assisting in the fields and helping with communal tasks that he had long dismissed as beneath him. This would teach him humility and accountability, ensuring that the lesson endured beyond the immediate shame. The village nodded in agreement, recognizing a resolution that preserved honor while correcting wrongdoing. Amina's courage became an unspoken inspiration. In the days that followed, she continued her daily routines, yet the villagers treated her with a quiet reverence. Women approached her with questions, young girls sought her guidance on how to navigate challenges, and even men who had once doubted her wisdom began to consult her on matters of fairness. Her family, once concerned for her safety, now saw their daughter as a symbol of strength, a reminder that bravery could coexist with respect and intelligence. Mariam, her mother, often watched Amina from the kitchen doorway, her eyes misty but proud. "You have done what many fear," she said softly one evening, placing a hand over her daughter's shoulder. "And you have done it with grace." Yet Amina knew the work was not finished. True change required patience, teaching, and the reinforcement of values that had been eroded by arrogance and entitlement. She began speaking more openly in community gatherings, sharing lessons not as commands but as stories, carefully crafted to guide without shame. Power, she would say, is not in fear or wealth. True power is in the way we treat one another, the way we honor our families, and the way we hold ourselves accountable. Her words, simple and direct, carried the weight of experience, and villagers listened, absorbing wisdom that had previously gone unspoken. Even Mbaraka, humbled but still young, began to change. Under the guidance of his uncle and the watchful eyes of the community, he learned to contribute to the village's needs without pretense or expectation of reward. His arrogance slowly softened, replaced by cautious respect. Amina observed him quietly, never gloating, always aware that transformation was more powerful than revenge. She continued her work in the fields, fetched water from the river, and sold vegetables in the market. Her presence a reminder that courage often comes without fanfare, yet leaves a mark deeper than any shout of victory. One evening, as the village prepared for the annual harvest festival, Amina sat under the baobab tree with Halima and Juma. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with shades of orange and crimson, and the scent of roasting maize filled the air. "We have done more than expose wrongdoing," Amina said quietly. "We have shown the village that even one person can make a difference without bringing shame to others." Halima nodded, her eyes reflecting the golden light. "And we have reminded everyone that strength can be gentle, patient, and wise," she added. Juma smiled, the pride of friendship and shared struggle evident in his expression. The festival began as the first stars appeared, and the villagers danced, sang, and shared stories of harvest and resilience. Amina moved among them, her heart full, not of pride, but of quiet satisfaction. She knew that the seeds of change had been planted, and that the lessons of courage, patience, and justice would continue to grow. Her family gathered nearby, laughing together as they had before, yet with a deeper understanding of the value of integrity and the power of standing firm. By the end of the evening, Nyamisi felt transformed. The shadow of fear that Mbaraka's arrogance had cast over the village was gone, replaced by a subtle, enduring awareness that justice and dignity were not reserved for the powerful alone. Amina's actions had created a ripple, one that would be remembered for seasons to come, whispered in the rustle of the leaves, in the laughter of children, and in the lessons shared between neighbors. Her story was no longer just hers, it belonged to the village, a testament to what courage and wisdom could achieve when guided by respect and patience. Weeks passed in Nyamisi, and the village slowly settled into a rhythm of normalcy. But the impact of Amina's bravery remained visible in every corner. People moved through the market with steadier eyes and lighter hearts. Mothers whispered lessons to their daughters about courage and respect. Boys learned that privilege did not give the right to harm others. Even the elders, who had long clung to tradition as the unshakable law of the village, now spoke openly about accountability and fairness. Amina's presence had shifted the very way the community measured honor. Mbaraka, once untouchable in his arrogance, now approached life differently. He tilled the communal fields at dawn, carried water from the river without complaint, and greeted villagers with humility. At first, his efforts were clumsy, often drawing quiet chuckles from the children, but he persisted. Over time, his posture softened, and a tentative respect grew in his voice when speaking to others. Amina observed him from a distance, never interfering, only noting the small but meaningful steps of change. She understood that real transformation came from learning and acknowledgement, not punishment alone. Amina's family, relieved and proud, continued their daily lives, their small home now a symbol of quiet strength. Miriam often recalled the days of fear when Mbaraka had shadowed her daughter, and she marveled at the courage that had brought justice without shame. Amina's father, stooped and quiet, would sometimes smile in secret, feeling the weight of the village's respect settle around their family like a protective cloak. And Amina herself continued her routine as though nothing had changed, yet each movement carried the confidence of someone who had faced a storm and survived with grace. The village began to see shifts beyond personal interactions. Conversations at communal gatherings turned toward fairness and leadership, the responsibility of the powerful, and the role of ordinary villagers in holding each other accountable. Young women, inspired by Amina, found their voices, speaking in council meetings about matters that had previously been ignored. Boys learned humility, understanding that strength was measured by how one treated others, not by wealth or title. Even the elders admitted that the quiet courage of one girl had reshaped the moral compass of Nyamisi. One day, as Amina walked along the riverbank, she noticed a group of children attempting to help a small bird tangled in reeds. She paused, smiling at their determination. This moment, ordinary yet filled with hope, reminded her that courage was not always grand. It lived in the everyday acts of care, respect, and persistence. Halima joined her, and together they watched the birds struggle free, a tiny symbol of freedom and resilience. "This village is changing," Halima said softly, "and it's because of the way you taught everyone to stand, even when fear is near." Amina only nodded, understanding that the true measure of impact was quiet, enduring, and unseen by many. The seasons turned, and the harvest festivals came and went, each one richer than the last. Nyamisi had grown stronger, not because of wealth or power, but because courage had found its place in the hearts of the people. Amina continued to walk through the village with her basket of vegetables, greeted now with smiles and respect rather than nervous glances. She helped teach the younger girls how to move through life with dignity, how to observe without fear, and how to speak truth with care. Mbaraka, transformed by experience and guidance, approached her one evening as the sun dipped low over the hills. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. "I have learned much," he said quietly, "and I will strive to be better, not only for myself but for the village." Amina nodded, seeing sincerity in his eyes, yet aware that lasting change required continued action, not just words. She allowed herself a small smile, knowing that even a former oppressor could learn, and that justice, tempered with patience, was the strongest teacher. Years later, Amina's story remained alive in Nyamisi, told beside fires and in quiet conversations among neighbors. The tale of the girl who stood against the chief's nephew became more than a story of defiance. It became a lesson in courage, wisdom, and the power of truth. She had shown that standing up did not always require confrontation or shame, that cleverness paired with patience could topple arrogance, and that even one voice, when guided by morality, could reshape an entire community. The village, resilient and proud, continued its rhythms, but with an enduring awareness that honor belonged to those who acted with integrity, courage, and care. And so, under the same baobab trees and beside the same river, where fear had once whispered in the shadows, Nyamisi thrived. Amina walked among her neighbors, her life ordinary in appearance, yet extraordinary in impact. She had faced arrogance, confronted power, and most importantly, she had done it in a way that preserved dignity, strengthened her community, and inspired generations. Her story was not just hers, it belonged to every heart that chose courage over fear, patience over haste, and justice over silence. In the quiet village of Nyamisi, young Amina faces the unwanted attention of Mbaraka, the chief's arrogant nephew. Armed with courage, wit, and the quiet support of her friends, she carefully gathers evidence, exposing his wrongdoing without bringing shame to her family. Through patience, intelligence, and bravery, Amina challenges traditional power, inspires her village, and teaches that true strength lies in integrity and resilience. Her story is a testament to how one determined voice can spark change, restore justice, and leave a lasting impact on an entire community.